This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from Africa and beyond. Let's start with a run through the markets here for you. Quite in contrast to Monday's positivity, Tuesday, however, comes with a flood of red ink across the board. Kenyan bank non-performing loans are over 15% among medium and small banks, essentially approaching 20% in the former. Now, large banks, however, are in a very different place. The non-performing loan portfolio so far is under 10%. The percentage of earnings that we're seeing from interest on non-government lending has actually gradually fallen from 60% in 2015 to 50% last year. That points to how aggressive government borrowing is progressively crowding out the private sector. In this country, Standard Chartered reported a 31% fall in first half net earnings today. Net interest income and non-interest revenue are down by 4.6% and 6.6% respectively. Its loan book, however, did go up by nearly 12% compared to the same period in 2019. Here's what's coming up tonight. The Kenyan mobile service provider Safaricom has $5 million to invest in the tech sector. A severe forex shortage is threatening economic recovery efforts in Nigeria. And negotiators from the United States and China reaffirmed a commitment to the Phase 1 trade agreement. Let's start in East Africa with the Kenyan telecommunications giant Safaricom. It plans to invest about $5 million in local tech startups in Kenya. Now, these investments will be made through the firm's Spark Fund, which focuses on late seed and early growth stage ventures in education, healthcare, and agriculture. However, the fund is open to investing in startups in other categories as long as the firms complement Safaricom's product offering. On to South Africa now, where the cell phone maker Mobicel has set up a new assembly plant. The facility is located in Johannesburg, and it will allow the firm to grow its market share in Africa's most industrialized economy. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu filed this report.
Mobicel is not only investing in its growth and expansion, it also wants to create much-needed employment in South Africa. This new state-of-the-art end-to-end facility will focus on employing young black women.
So at the time of the COVID hitting, we started to notice even more women were really impacted by this. In the tech and the manufacturing industry, just in general, there's not much woman employment. And we all understand that the challenges that our ladies face in the job market. We saw this as the perfect opportunity to actually address this. It was a time when a lot of business was closing down. It was a lot of people were losing jobs. But we wanted to actually flip the whole script on its head and go for something more special.
Young women are put through an extensive 3-week training and induction program. Their only requirement is a matric certificate.
So it's not about us looking at a CV and saying, this candidate ticks the boxes, they are now suitable, let's hire. There's so many women out here in South Africa that are passionate and ambitious, but they need this opportunity. And because we are able to train, because we are able to bring them in and equip them with all the skills, we saw this as a great opportunity to make a hard call and say that our new assembly plant is going to be run fully by a woman and black South African woman.
For these ladies, it's not only a job, it's an opportunity to acquire skills that can empower them for the future.
When I came here, you're inexperienced, like you have no idea what you're going to do. And this opens the door for you to be like a qualified technician. And working by a place where it's permanently, that's a blessing. Because a lot of girls my age, that's struggling to get a job because you just matriculated and you don't have experience.
This is, a great opportunity whereby, now I don't even have to ask. Now I can help myself out. If I could say that, I came here as everybody, but when time went by, I got promoted and, so I believe that I can still grow within this. This is just not opportunity. I feel like we're still going to grow.
Mobicel has already hired and trained 65 ladies in this assembly plant. The company is planning on employing an additional 50 women over the next few months. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
We're still in South Africa. The country's property market is proving to be unexpectedly chirpy, despite the economic slump caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Annual house price growth in Africa's most industrialized economy stood at 1.4% year-on-year in July. Now, in comparison, prices of houses only rose by 0.7% in June and 0.6% in May. From Johannesburg, here's CGTN's Julie Shire.
Buying property in South Africa can be difficult for new entrants, but as the country emerges from one of the longest lockdowns in the world, the real estate market is making a surprise turnaround. New buyers are flocking to cash in on properties selling for under $180,000.
Interest rates being at 7%, it has become very attractive as well for first-time buyers and for those people that have been sitting on the fence for some time. There's definitely been a lot more activity with sectional title, apartments versus freehold. So the housing market itself, unfortunately, is particularly quiet, but there definitely has been some good movement in sectional title.
The prime property market, however, which draws substantial foreign investment, is slower to recover. South Africa's ports remain closed and international travel is still banned.
Johannesburg, the upper end, of course, is exceptionally quiet. In Cape Town, or should I say the Western Cape, Atlantic Seaboard, I recently did the most expensive sale in the country this year. That being said, it was only, and I say only, relative to past years, it was only 75 million rand. Now, in past years, the numbers, the record price ever achieved for a residential property was 290 million rand.
Driftwood Estates, a holiday destination agent outside Durban on the East Coast, says they're seeing signs of improvement and are optimistic that new investment will soon start rolling in.
For my specific business in terms of holiday accommodation, obviously disappeared completely as people weren't allowed to move. But has picked up significantly as the inter-province travel, and even once people were allowed to travel within KwaZulu-Natal. The sales have been great over the last couple of months. A house was sold the other day for 12 million.
Real estate agents believe a shift towards more quality lifestyles after being cooped up for months during the COVID-19 lockdown is driving demand for more comfortable and affordable housing. But with South Africa's economy yet to fully open, the recovery for the rest of the market may remain subdued for the rest of this year. Julie Shire, CGTN, Durban, South Africa.
Right, then a quick run through some company news. Let's start in Kenya. The struggling retailer Tusker Mattresses Limited, or Tuskies as it's more commonly known over here, says it has secured a financing facility worth just about $18 million from a Mauritius-based fund, which it declined to name. That facility will help alleviate the retailer's current capital constraints. Tuskies currently owns roughly $57 million to suppliers and her creditors. The Continental Bank Group, ABSA, has reported an 82% slump in half-year net earnings. The group attributes that decline to the need to make huge provisions as clients are struggling to repay their loans. By end June, ABSA provided about $515 million worth of loan service relief on $9.1 billion worth of debt to some 538,000 clients. That includes some 20,000 businesses in South Africa alone. The furniture and appliance retailer, the Lewis Group, reported a 30.8% drop in annual earnings. Despite the damage inflicted by this pandemic, the company declared a final dividend of 65 cents a share for the year ending on the 31st of March. That takes into its total dividend to around 185 rand cents, around a fifth lower compared to 2019. The Lewis Group shares were more than 6% higher at 8.29 GMT, but they have fallen by over 60% so far in the year. And finally, the fast food giant KFC is pausing the use of its popular slogan, finger-licking good, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, KFC says that the 64-year-old tagline is not exactly a proper fit in an era of face masks and a lot of advice to constantly wash our hands and watch where we place them. Now, the slogan, to be clear, isn't gone forever. KFC will bring it back when the time is right. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. We'll explore how a severe shortage of foreign currency is threatening an economic recovery in Nigeria. And Egypt's trade in fragrant jasmine flowers is blossoming, quite literally. We'll take you to one of these farms when we come back.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head over to Nigeria. Africa's largest oil producer is facing a severe foreign currency shortage following the collapse of the price of its main export, crude oil. Now, the country's long-held multiple exchange rates and capital controls have compounded the problem as companies and foreign investors are finding it increasingly difficult to be able to access US dollars with ease or even just to move capital out of the country. As CGTN's Deja Badmus now reports, there are growing fears that this FX shortage could limit the recovery of Africa's largest oil producer.
The last time Nigeria experienced the current forex liquidity shortage was in 2016, when the country slipped into recession. With another recession looming, the problem has resurfaced, and the course is not uniquely different from the last time. A fall in oil price, the country's main source of forex earnings, and a drop in remittances flow as a result of global disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic have both combined to hurt the country's forex revenue. Even foreign investments, too, have been greatly impacted.
The focus in Nigeria, unfortunately, has been with the portfolio investors. And they come in and out, and when the conditions are good, they're in. When the conditions are bad, they're out. But FDI is more calculated, is more focused on the long-term economic growth and development. And clearly, Nigeria is probably doing under $2 billion a year in FDIs.
Nigeria's capital market has been badly hit as a result of the situation, as foreign portfolio investors bid for the gates, seeking alternative markets.
For most of the foreign investors bought the FMDQ OTC futures contract, FX futures contract rather, and it's a Naira non-deliverable forward that they get Naira and they still have to source for their dollars. So what we've been seeing now is that for most of the foreign investors, despite the assurances from the CBN, for most of them have not been able to repatriate their proceeds.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has so far carried out 2 rounds of devaluation as part of its strategy to ease the pressure on the local currency and bring about a single exchange rate for the country. It also added some new items on its list of items banned from accessing forex through the official market. Even banks too have had to ration the sale of forex and review spending limits of customers. But the scarcity still persists, and some analysts say the situation could go on for the next 18 months if oil prices continue to remain low.
So at the point when oil prices are over $100 a barrel, then you should see the Naira appreciate against the dollar. And at a time when oil prices are low, you should see the Naira devalued. But basically, because you have a static exchange rate regime, we've suffered devaluation and we're not seeing that revaluation.
We need to ensure that our foreign exchange policy incentivizes investment, allows or encourages inflow of foreign capital and foreign direct investment. We need to remove the current level of uncertainty around a lot of policy issues.
The National Bureau of Statistics here has just released the GDP figures of the country for the second quarter. Not surprisingly, the economy contracted by 6%, even though oil continues to account for around 9% of the entire GDP. Fact is, if prices do not go up, the entire economy will continue to feel the shock. And of course, the forex challenge will continue to bite harder. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Elsewhere, the International Monetary Fund has released a statement arguing that the independence of central banks needs to be maintained. The lender insists that without credible institutions and sound fiscal and monetary policies, sustained economic growth will simply not be possible. Now, that statement came barely 48 hours after Zambia's President Edgar Lungu suddenly sacked the central bank governor Denny Kalyalia and gave absolutely no reason for doing so. Lungu replaced him with the former Deputy Finance Minister Christopher Mvunga. Kalyalia previously served as a World Bank Executive Director. He was appointed in February 2015 and he had his contract extended in 2018. Now, that contract was due to end in 2023. His dismissal comes barely 3 days after the Bank of Zambia held its rate-setting meeting at which it cut its benchmark lending rate by 125 basis points to around 8%. That cut was part of policies designed to safeguard the stability of the financial sector and protect livelihoods amidst the damage inflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, on to North Africa. At roughly 1,000 acres, over 90% of Egypt's jasmine fields are located in the Garbia Governorate. The fields are fed by the mineral and sediment-rich waters of the Nile shortly before the river reaches the Mediterranean. The country's jasmine farmers pick about 20 tons of these scented flowers every day. CGTN's Alexander Majala has the rest of that story.
Egypt's Garbia region is the heartland of its jasmine harvest. According to international trade figures, the aromatic oils extracted for perfumes from here make up over half of the global supply.
We learned to harvest since we were young, and this profession needs attention and quick hands because we only reap the small blooming flowers.
During the harvest season, picking begins around midnight and ends a few hours after dawn each day. A tough job, but a hard-working picker can harvest as much as 5 kilograms or 11 pounds of petals a day. While it is cooler to work after dark, the key reason harvesting is done at night is because it is only then that the flowers fully open.
Egypt's jasmine production in the season, which starts in June until November, is around 5 tons of jasmine.
According to the International Federation of Essential Oils and Aroma Trades, Egypt and India dominate the production of jasmine extract for perfumes, making up around 95% of supply. Jasmine trade is estimated to pull in some $6.5 million annually for Egypt, providing income to around 50,000 people.
There are some competitors to Egypt in jasmine production, such as India and Tunisia. That's why we are trying to produce the best quality we have.
The Fakhri Essential Oils factory handles around 70% of the region's floral production. They compress and grind the delicate blossoms down. From that paste, the precious scented oils can be extracted by distillation. From all those flowers, some 5 tons of dense jasmine paste is finally produced each year. Egyptian farmers have long complained that the low production costs of their big rival India drive their prices down. But the economic impact of the novel coronavirus pandemic has been harder still, with demand dropping sharply. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
An innovator in Ghana has rolled out a real-time tracker of confirmed COVID-19 infections across Africa. The app in question was developed to bridge the information gap during the early stages of the pandemic on the continent. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai takes up the story from Accra.
When Ghana recorded its first case of the coronavirus in March, Darlington Akogo and his team developed a dashboard to trace its spread across Africa. It was aimed at helping governments make informed decisions on how to fight the virus.
We had thousands of people visit this platform, and beyond just showing the number, we did a lot of analysis to show you that, okay, how does Africa compare to other parts of the world? Then eventually the countries themselves started taking responsibility for this, so they started producing their own dashboard. And the person that is supposed to be responsible for producing this across Africa is either the WHO offices for Africa or CDC, Africa CDC. So eventually they did this.
With the World Health Organization and Africa Centers for Disease Control COVID-19 dashboards in place, his team had to up its game. They are now using the data to predict how the infections could spread in the future as Ghana and other African countries plan to reopen their borders.
Should we decide to open the borders, it shouldn't just be based on past data. You should be able to predict what happens if you do open the borders. And that is what we are trying to work on, our predictive modeling. So anytime you want to take a decision, you run models, you run simulations and see how would it play out if you take this decision. So that will either advise you to either open borders or not to open borders. Or even more specifically, if you do decide to open borders, open them in a very, very specific way.
The team is also developing artificial intelligence solutions to detect abnormalities related to COVID-19 from medical images such as chest x-rays. Darlington says he is now partnering other organizations from across Africa to collect data for real-time analysis of the spread of COVID-19. He hopes the results from this can help governments fight the virus effectively. But a funding gap has stalled the process of work as he mainly relies on grants from external sources and is yet to get financial support from the government. As Africa's COVID-19 infections surpass 1 million, Darlington says more analysis is needed to track the cases in order to know what needs to be done to stop the spread. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Now, South Africa's response to the COVID-19 pandemic has triggered a rather common frustration among citizens, essentially trying to figure out what is and what isn't permitted as the country moves through the various levels of lockdown. Solving that problem, however, has provided an opportunity for a new app, which is now helping South Africans get through these unprecedented times. CGTN's Yolisa Ntamela tried it out.
The proudly South African app navigates the complexities of the lockdown regulations. The process of creating it began after President Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement of the risk-adjusted strategy to reopen the South African economy through a phased approach. The app is called Lockdown Boza.
So Boza means boss in South Africa as a slang. And we deliberately chose that name because, the idea was basically your boza, your boss, effectively is going to guide you and simplify things for you throughout the lockdown period.
Raul and his wife Emma Patel are one of the 4 developers and entrepreneurs behind this invention. It took them a mere 4 days to develop, test and release the app.
It was there to really focus on the things that South Africans are interested in. So, for example, not everyone needs to know all the rules. I might just need to know what are the rules around education. Some other person wants to know whether they can buy alcohol. So it was really about putting the information into bite-sized chunks and making it really, really simple for people to follow that.
So the search is there, very easy to use. You type in any word that you want to, and it literally doesn't just search the name of the activity, but its contents as well. So for example, if you're looking for can I surf? Now, if you type in surf, it will bring up the fact that it's under beaches, which is the activity which you may not have thought to look there, and give you the relevant information.
An easy-to-follow color-coded system is used to display different activities under lockdown regulations.
So again, it was a discussion that we had, was saying, how can we make this as simple as possible for people when there's so many rules and regulations and they're ever changing and evolving. And we said, well, why not use a traffic light system? Everybody understands, no matter what language you speak.
So we've used the traffic light system with the red, amber and green because it's an easy way to identify things that you can and can't do. So red being that the activity is not permitted, amber, there are some restrictions, and green mean go for it, you're allowed. And it's an easy way to quickly see, without having to go into each activity and find out what it is, what the rules are.
The app gets its information from official government guidelines and other reputable industry sources.
A major aspect of the app, according to the co-founders, is to provide South Africans with reliable information about COVID-19 and to ensure that they do not rely on fake news about the virus.
The team continues to add new features to the app. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up shortly. China and US trade negotiators reaffirm their commitment to phase 1 of the trade deal. And we'll explore why authorities in Mexico have outlawed the sale of junk food to minors. All that and more is coming up shortly.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's run through some of the stories making headlines at this hour. The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met the Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok earlier today. Pompeo was in Sudan for an official visit. Sudan at the moment is currently listed by the United States as a state sponsor of terror. During the meeting, the Sudanese Prime Minister discussed removing his country from that particular list. The two sides also discussed Sudan's deepening relations with Israel. Ethiopian and Sudanese leaders have also expressed their commitment to getting a successful end to ongoing negotiations over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The leaders met during a one-day visit by the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to Khartoum. Abiy and his Sudanese counterparts Abdallah Hamdok discussed the need to reach what they described as a mutually agreeable solution to Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt as well. And in healthcare, Africa has crossed a major health milestone, this entire pandemic notwithstanding. The World Health Organization has certified Africa as free from wild polio. It's a virus that attacks the spinal cord, causing irreversible paralysis in children. Medical experts say immunization campaigns and community outreach programs have helped to stop the spread of that disease in Africa. So far this year, only Afghanistan and Pakistan have recorded cases of wild polio virus. That's a run through your headlines. Now, top US and Chinese trade officials have reaffirmed their respective countries' commitment to the Phase 1 trade agreement. That pledge was made in a telephone call between the US Trade Representative, Robert Lighthizer, and the US Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, and the Chinese Vice Premier, Liu He. Now, this is their first formal set of talks since early May, and it came amid concern that the deal could be on shaky ground because of worsening ties between China and the United States. The call was originally expected to take place on the 15th of August, 6 months after the trade deal was formally coming into effect. However, Washington last week postponed the talks with Beijing. Now, it's been more than 8 months since the world's top two economies signed the Phase 1 trade agreement. Here's CGTN's Wang Hui with a close look at what this deal entails.
After a nearly 2-year-long trade dispute, China and the U.S. finally inked their Phase 1 trade agreement in January this year, which took effect on February 14th. The agreement calls for China to increase purchases of U.S. farm and manufactured products, energy, and services. China will also increase American access to China's financial services markets and will make improvements towards better intellectual property protections. According to the deal, China will buy additional $200 billion of goods and services from the U.S. in 2020 and 2021 on top of the amount of 2017. The target for this year is $76.7 billion, but the ongoing coronavirus pandemic has significantly affected the bilateral trade, particularly trade in services. According to Chinese customs, China's imports from the U.S. in the first half of this year didn't go up as the agreement expected, but dropped about $5.4 billion from last year, down to nearly $113 billion.
China has always been very serious about its commitments, and this Phase 1 agreement is not an exception. Despite the pandemic, China has done its best to reach its goal, but the U.S. has used national security and intellectual property issues as excuses to limit some American exports to China, especially in technology. In this case, you can't blame China.
Tensions between the two countries have been high, with U.S. President Donald Trump ordering American firms to cease business with Chinese-owned apps, WeChat and TikTok, earlier in August, citing national security concerns. TikTok's owner, ByteDance, has filed a lawsuit challenging the order. The Chinese Commerce Ministry has also expressed opposition towards Washington's moves, accusing it of using the National Security Review of Foreign Investment as a political tool and abusing it. These issues are expected to be addressed in upcoming bilateral trade talks.
Both sides will evaluate how they've implemented the Phase 1 agreement in order to weed out any issues. I think one of the biggest problems is the unpredictable nature of some American officials, which has led to inconsistency and instability on the U.S. side. This had made it difficult for bilateral trade and exchange.
The U.S. are piling on pressure on Chinese companies listed on American exchanges to comply with U.S. audits or be delisted. Officials say Chinese companies have been trading on the exchanges with limited oversight.
Securities and Exchange Commission to subject Chinese companies to the same audit inspections as American firms. It follows similar legislation the U.S. Senate passed in May that would also bar U.S. initial public offerings by Chinese firms unless they comply.
Dealing with Chinese companies and their special problems should always have been on the agenda of the SEC. They've been having problems with China-based companies going back about 8 years.
The U.S. has had limited regulatory oversight of U.S.-listed Chinese firms, partly because Chinese national security law prohibits foreign access to audits of China-based companies, but also because of Wall Street's massive appetite for Chinese stocks.
The SEC has not been able to do anything because Wall Street is very powerful, and the SEC's budget is controlled by people in the Senate, and the people in the Senate listen to what Wall Street has to say because Wall Street makes campaign contributions, and so the SEC has not wanted to take strong steps against China-based companies because it would cut off IPOs, which are a huge source of revenues for investment banks and law firms in Wall Street.
At stake is nearly $2 trillion US, the estimated combined value of more than 200 Chinese firms listed here, as the new rules could drive Chinese companies elsewhere.
Chinese companies who haven't yet conducted IPOs are thinking, obviously, first about their onshore market, the A-share markets of Shanghai and Shenzhen, and increasingly a NASDAQ-like market called STAR, the science and technology market in Shanghai. The companies who are qualified to stay the course and list in China have more seriously considered it now, but it's extremely difficult to list in China, make no mistake. That's why Chinese companies then would revert to Hong Kong.
The latest push to tighten rules for Chinese companies was brought on by two key catalysts: the multi-billion-dollar fraud scandal by NASDAQ-listed Chinese company Luckin Coffee in the spring that roiled capital markets, and deepening tensions between Washington and Beijing over a wide range of issues, including trade, security, and the handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Recent escalation saw the U.S. closing the Chinese consulate in Texas for allegedly stealing intellectual property, criticizing China over Hong Kong's security law, and moves to ban Chinese apps TikTok and WeChat.
What these Chinese American tensions have done is they've created political space to do what, in my view, is right from the point of view of U.S. investors, which is to restrict the ability of firms that are unreachable by the U.S. legal system from listing here.
The argument for the change is that while it could hurt U.S. investors and exchanges in the short term, it could benefit everyone in the long run.
If you're going to take a market like China and in some way exclude them from participating in this market, that's a competitive disadvantage. Now, on the other hand, your markets have to have integrity. They've got to be compliant. Everyone has to play by the rules.
Wall Street may be lobbying against the legislation, but Main Street is hedging its bet on some measure of a game change, especially since there is bipartisan support for leveling the playing field. I'm Li Lingtan for CGTN, New York.
China's foreign minister is in Italy. It's his first stop on his tour of Europe. He sat down with his Italian counterpart, Luigi Di Maio, to discuss trade and the COVID-19 pandemic. Both parties underscored the importance of cooperation. Beijing said China and Europe will work together to beat the pandemic, revive economic growth around the world, and protect the multilateral trade order. The foreign minister will be visiting 5 European nations in coming days. His next stop is going to be the Netherlands.
China and Italy are both countries with a responsibility for world peace and stability. Thus, we should vigorously defend multilateralism and free trade and maintain a stable global industrial supply chain. Italy will host the G20 next year. China will fully support Italy's work and make positive contributions to moving forward with global governance reforms after the pandemic and achieving an early recovery of the world economy.
Italy has always been a bridge of cooperation between the East and the West. We respect all our allies. This year marks the 59th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries. We will sincerely promote comprehensive cooperation in culture, the economy, and trade. We have a long history of bilateral cooperation, and I believe it will have a bright future.
Onto the world of tech now. TikTok is suing the Trump administration over an executive order banning any American transactions with its parent company, the Chinese-based firm ByteDance. Now, in a federal suit filed on Monday in California, TikTok essentially argues that the app is not in any way a national security threat, and it describes the ban being put against it as unfair and illegal.
The popular video app TikTok has officially filed a lawsuit in federal court challenging the executive orders issued by President Donald Trump earlier this month. He'd used his emergency economic powers to issue an initial order that bans the app from doing transactions in the country within 45 days, a move that could essentially take away much of the advertising revenue generated here in the U.S. And a second executive order gave ByteDance internet company 90 days to divest from its American assets and any data that TikTok had gathered in the US. Analysts say TikTok's challenging the first order on commercial grounds.
My understanding, the first, which is what a lot of the court attention is about today, can actually be appealed in court, and that's what TikTok is doing, what ByteDance is doing, to perhaps buy a little bit of time or delay and perhaps preserve some value in the sale. The second, though, I don't believe can be challenged. So they're both quite serious to experience, basically, but they're both different.
President Donald Trump has repeatedly argued that the app poses a national security threat because of its Chinese ties. But TikTok has said that it had taken extraordinary measures to protect user privacy and data by storing all of its data outside of China on servers here in the United States and Singapore. They also argued that the Trump administration had failed to follow due process, provide any evidence that TikTok was an actual threat, nor justification for its punitive actions. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has also issued a response.
China supports the relevant companies in taking up legal weapons to safeguard their rights and interests, and will continue to take all necessary measures to resolutely safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies.
Analysts are saying that it's not very usual to see emergency economic powers to be used against a technology giant. And some are saying this may have been influenced by political motivations, given how much Trump has escalated the political rhetoric against China during his re-election campaign. It is Tian Shan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
On to some macroeconomic data now. Germany's economic output contracted by over 11% in the second quarter of the year. Now that, to be fair, is slightly better than the 11.7% contraction that the government had initially estimated. The German Statistics Office says that the plunge wasn't as steep as reported in the first release, but still, this is the largest decline on record since 1970. Quarter-to-quarter decline was 9.7% in the second quarter. Germany's IFO Institute expects the country's quarter-on-quarter GDP growth to rise to about 7% in Q3. But it's warning that the recovery remains fragile amid fears of a resurgence in COVID-19 infections. Now, speaking of COVID-19, in Mexico, the vast majority of people who've actually died from it have either had diabetes, hypertension, or obesity as a pre-existing condition. To help reduce these health problems in the long run, one Mexican state has now banned the sale of junk food completely to minors. And now other states in the country are preparing to pass similar legislation. CGTN's Frank Contreras reports from Mexico City.
Throughout Mexico, small neighborhood stores like this one, called the Red Star, are familiar sights. Their best-selling items are usually things like potato and corn chips, packaged pastries and other snacks, sugary soft drinks, and a wide array of candies made in Mexico and imported from abroad. For more than 30 years, Juan Aquino and his sister Carmelita have been operating stores like this. He knows that his home state of Oaxaca recently banned junk food sales to children. Now, Mexico City may do the same.
I believe it will affect me because if I do not sell potato chips, we'd have little, if any, income. But in the larger picture, I think it's better for the country because children have been eating lots of junk food.
In Oaxaca, kids under the age of 18 are not allowed to purchase chips, sugary drinks, or candies. They can only buy such merchandise if accompanied by a parent. But in Mexico, junk food, which is high in calories from sugar or fat, is everywhere, and it comes in all flavors and sizes. This fried pork skin, called a chicharrón, is a best-seller in this market. Mexico is among the countries with the highest number of cases of childhood and adult obesity. Citizens are becoming increasingly aware that their nation has a problem.
The outbreak of the coronavirus has given families a chance to pause and think about how they're feeding their children. Analysts say that's what's bringing about the changes in state laws regarding junk food sales.
What has triggered this change in conscience in the population is the pandemic, and when they see that 80% of the people who are dying have diabetes, hypertension, or they are overweight.
At least 10 other states across Mexico and the nation's capital are exploring legislation that would ban junk food sales to minors. The legislative efforts are nonpartisan and come from all major Mexican political parties. One state is even planning to ban advertising of such items. Frank Contreras, CGTN, Mexico City.
Now, much of Shenzhen's success as a tech and manufacturing hub comes down to its relatively tightly integrated hardware ecosystem. At the heart of it is an area known as Huaqiangbei. If you need just about any kind of processor, circuit board, sensor, there's a pretty good chance that someone here either manufactures it, can help you design it, or make a prototype. CGTN's Omar Khan explored the area's significance for what's hot tonight.
So we're here in a part of Shenzhen known as Huaqiangbei, and for anyone working in the tech industry and hardware, they'll know that this Huaqiangbei area of Shenzhen is a hardware capital of the world. Any parts, any circuits, any sort of pieces that go into your phone, that can all be found here, be it broken, be it secondhand used, or you need it to get repaired, you can come here to Huaqiangbei and have that. But as you can see around me, there are those name brand shops from Lenovo to Dell to Microsoft. That's all available here as well. But as you venture deeper into some of these markets, you'll find those smaller sort of stalls where literally anything can be customized, anything can be tailored to what you exactly need, and then can be moved on to another part of Huaqiangbei and can be assembled. So everything from hardware to technology to putting anything together can be done right here in the heart of Shenzhen.
这个是3D 视频显微镜用于这个手机检修啊、电路板的检测呀这些，然后可以放大、缩小，也可以测量。
So people obviously come here, they make a living, they're here to sell products and do business, but it's also a place they spend so much time here. You can see this guy right here. Got to catch up with him earlier today. He's from Zhejiang province, enjoying live NBA action. Audio technician quickly bought some. 你买了什么东西啊？
买了这个小转接头。
I think tiny little antennas that he was able to buy just within a few minutes of coming in. I was able to locate them and make a purchase. Look how easy and convenient that is.
Coming to this part of the city is a tech consumer's paradise, but it's also providing opportunities to those looking for something beyond a job in wholesale by branching out into their own ventures. Take Liu Jiping as an example, who spent considerable time in Huaqiangbei.
I came here in 2013 looking to bridge R&D together with application. I worked in Huaqiangbei for 3 years with more than 100 types of chips and was able to put them into production. Once produced elsewhere, we were able to come back here and sell them on the market. You could say that everything a consumer needs can be found here.
The electronics and hardware market has also seen considerable changes. It's helped propel many companies to success, but has also gone through the process of shedding products known as shanzhai, copied or counterfeit goods.
Huaqiangbei has accomplished a lot historically. It's become a distribution center for buying and selling. I think more than 80% of enterprises in Nanshan district have sort of hatched from Huaqiangbei. It's contributed to Shenzhen's reform and opening up. In the future, I think Shanghai will face more transformations and all of Huaqiangbei will introduce more systems for innovation and development.
Meanwhile, some of Shenzhen's and the world's biggest IT companies, including Alibaba, have also recognized Huaqiangbei as being essential to their business and clients.
Huaqiangbei has always been the #1 electronic street in China, probably the #1 in the world as well. 90% of the transactions involving electronic products happen in Huaqiangbei, so pretty much all digital brands and manufacturers can find their products in Huaqiangbei. Alibaba relies heavily on the innovation and capabilities of Shenzhen.
As China works to strengthen its intellectual property rights and stamp out copycat products, the future of Huaqiangbei, at least from that regard, is unclear. But for anyone still looking to find a place that's fostered innovation and a sense of open source technology, the heart of Shenzhen is still a source of inspiration. Omar Khan, CGTN, Shenzhen.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices for you. Cocoa futures in London back to levels last seen in early June. They're over 2% higher on a year-to-date basis, but still well off the peaks really hit in February of around 24.83. Now, amidst the economic crisis the country is facing, Zambia is actually considering increasing the 10% stake it owns in Mopani copper mines. Exactly how they're going to fund that acquisition and how much they want to increase the stake to, that bit is still unclear. Now, let's move on to Kenya. The economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic is causing widespread losses, and it's left many small businesses struggling to survive. As CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy now reports, some SMEs in Kenya's Turkana County have their backs to the wall as government restrictions are simply making their usual mode of operation impossible.
Evelyn To's vegetables and fruit business located in Turkana's Lodwar town used to generate just enough money to sustain our family. But since the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, sales have dropped, triggering anxiety over the future of our once thriving business.
Many people fear coming to town since it's normally crowded, so they think if they do, they will get infected and carry the virus back home.
To is not alone. Many other small, micro and medium enterprises in Turkana's Lodwar town are also struggling amid containment measures like curfews.
This is a booking office. People used to come here, they book tickets, they travel. But now people don't come, they don't travel, the fare has gone up.
Food stays in the shop until it expires. Business has for sure declined lately because there are no customers.
The challenges in Kenya's Turkana County mirrors the dilemma facing many Kenyan small business owners as they try to reopen despite uncertainties worsened by the coronavirus pandemic.
Small businesses are struggling to survive as a result of coronavirus restrictions that have seen hundreds of people take refuge from the virus outbreak by staying at home.
Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Turkana, Kenya.
And finally, for the past decade, gourmet and craft chocolate have really gone mainstream. There's a huge rise in high-quality craft food coming to market around the world, and chocolate has been part and parcel of that meta trend. CGTN's Louisa Lee filed this report.
As the world embraces a love of high-quality food, the craft chocolate industry is undergoing an evolutionary leap. And it's fair to say that the Ecuadorian company, Toac Chocolate, is ahead in this challenging yet fulfilling journey. Toac Chocolate's CEO, James Lecomte, came to Beijing for a craft chocolate and spirit tasting event, and I was lucky enough to try what he had to offer. It included the Harvest series, with flavors that vary depending on the soil and climate in which a cacao is grown, and the specialty aged collection, which ages the chocolate in barrels of different spirits, including whiskey, bourbon, and tequila. I had my share of wine pairing events, but this is the first time I had this chocolate and spirit pairing. It's incredible and is absolutely delectable. Can you tell us about this pairing event and how it came about?
I'm glad that you were able to draw that parallel because actually chocolate and wine have so much in common, and that's one of the ways that we're using education to raise people's understanding about the similarities between fine chocolate and fine wine. We're seeing, just like in China, that we've had so much interest in the coffee culture, third wave coffee or specialty coffee. The same with fine wine and whiskey have been such a huge phenomenon in China. We're also starting to see the early stages of the same type of pattern for fine chocolate, helping people to understand that how chocolate can be much more than a candy.
When I first snapped the chocolate, smelled it, and had a taste of it, I mean, my first reaction was, it has such a complex flavor. And you mentioned that it has up to 700 different compound flavors.
Yeah.
I would need like up to 700 adjectives to describe it.
This is a cacao pod, and the bean actually comes from the cacao pod. It's the bean that we use to make the chocolate with. Inside each one of these tiny little beans is more than 600 or 700 different flavor compounds. I mean, that's more than 2 to 3 times more than what we find in a wine grape.
Over 700 different compounds are found in cacao, or the food of the gods in Latin, providing a rich spectrum of flavors most people aren't aware of. To ensure chocolate lovers have a chance to experience one of the oldest chocolate varieties in the world called the Nacional, Toac Chocolate is going the extra mile to preserve the ancient product, which the Incas once considered to be more valuable than gold.
Nacional actually traces its genetic lineage back more than 5,000 years to the very beginning of chocolate, or cacao, in Ecuador. We can say that Ecuador is actually the birthplace of cacao. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Ecuador produced the Nacional variety, and it was the most sought after and most famed variety of cacao by all European chocolatiers. And it wasn't until 1916 that a disease came to Ecuador and wiped out this variety, so much so that it got to the point where people believed that this ancient variety was now extinct. We actually found 9 heirloom ancient Nacional trees that have been genetically tested in Ecuador, and we're using those to create a conservation program, a genetic bank if you like. It's from those trees that we produce our chocolate.
To save Ecuador's rare Nacional cacao variety from the brink of extinction, the clippings of the genetically verified Nacional trees are replanted in the reserve, managed by the Third Millennium Alliance. By working closely with a non-profit foundation, which protects over 700 hectares of endangered rainforest along the Ecuadorian coastal mountain range, they are able to successfully preserve the heirloom variety. To coincide with the idealism of craft chocolate movement, which is to give back to the local community, the farmers are getting paid 8 times the local market price, a premium that is well above fair trade wage.
Over the past decade, we have seen a hike of love for fine wine, artisanal coffee. Do you think Chinese consumers will have the same appreciation for fine chocolate or craft chocolate, or in your case, premium chocolate?
Chocolate is the ideal candidate as the next big thing in terms of specialty foods. The Chinese consumers, their palates have been developed in such a way that it's quite an easy step for them to take with fine chocolate.
With the growing awareness of food sustainability, Toac Chocolate is not alone when it comes to pushing forward this visionary mission. Other players have joined the green efforts as well, including Chicago-based company Shoka, which makes natural sodas crafted from pure Ecuadorian cacao fruit juice. Shoka uses or upcycles this juice, which is normally discarded during the production of chocolate. By doing this, the sustainability of chocolate production can be increased, and at the same time, cacao farmers are also given an additional source of revenue. With health benefits and saving the planet set as priorities, the definition of real chocolate may be reconsidered, and the market may be reshuffled for the better. Louisa Lee for CGTN.
Quick run through the currencies for you as we wrap up the program. The South African rand continues to strengthen against American dollar, dipping into the 16s today. But Zambia's kwacha is still having an absolutely horrible time in the market. It does continue to fall after the sudden and unexplained firing of the former Bank of Zambia governor. It hit yet another record low today, 19.295. So far, just in August, the currency has ceded nearly 6% to the dollar. Those are your currencies, and that's it for tonight's edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. Many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The news continues on CGTN.